It's time to talk Gophers hoops, and we're going to talk about, can Minnesota pull off another road upset, a big one against Indiana, and is it time for Gophers fans to start showing Ben Johnson a little bit of grace? We're talking about that today at Locked On Golden Gophers.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. I appreciate you kind of embracing these afternoon shows, and it carries over to the next day for some of the morning listeners. But overall, I got to make sure to get you that daily Gophers content, so it's still coming in strong. Today, we're talking about the men's basketball team, because can they pull off another road upset against an even better Indiana basketball team? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the keys to that game. And then finally, we got to talk about Ben Johnson, because I think it's time that Gophers fans can give him a little bit of grace. And I'm not saying all out forgiveness. He is the future, no matter what, lock it down. But I think that it's time to get out of the take lock a little bit and embrace what is happening. We're going to dive into all of that today. So be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of your daily Gophers content. Tomorrow, we'll be back to the football talk of the offseason, as well as covering the women's basketball game and how they fared against Michigan. Now, that game is going on right now, where the Gophers are currently leading, so hopefully they can hold on to that one and get a Big Ten win in this new year. But let's talk about the men's basketball team. They have a 7-game winning streak going right now, and even through the ups and the downs of some of these games, the Minnesota has been pretty, nice to see that they can run their offense through different players. Even when Dawson Garcia gets hurt, they can find a way. Even when Cam Christie isn't shooting his best, they can find a way to generate offense through different players. Mike Mitchell Jr. has stepped up on many occasions. Last game, he was a little bit down, but then you had Cam Christie who led the way. You've had Elijah Hawkins lead the way. You've had Dawson Garcia lead the way. Pharrell Payne's jumped in there. Josh Ola-Joseph. They have different ways of attacking, and that is what makes this team a little bit tricky for other opponents in the Big Ten. So if they can continue to have that, depending on the game plan, depending on the personnel that they're playing, and depending on who's hot and who has a hot hand, it's a great thing for the Gophers to be able to ride. Now, this team definitely has a we before me attitude, and Ben Johnson is not afraid to sit someone if they show glimpses of thinking of themselves first and taking ill-advised shots earlier into the clock or things like that, rather than getting a opportune look as a team. That has been prominent throughout this season. You've seen it in moments, and it's for anybody. It could be Dawson Garcia. It could be Cam Christie. It could be Mike Mitchell Jr. He will sit you down if you're not playing team-style basketball to focus on the offense that they are trying to run within the system. And that is night and day from years previous, because before, we had seen even last year moments where Jaden Henley was doing a little bit too much iso ball, too much dribbling around. Jamison Battle sometimes doing a little bit too much iso ball, too many shots outside of the 3-point line, but also just not natural shots, just kind of jacking it up early into the clock. That will not happen anymore. If it happens, you're on the bench, plain and simple. And I give credit to Ben Johnson for that, because he's holding his own, and he's really excuse me, he is really making sure that his team is playing team basketball and doing what this system needs. And he should be, because that is his job on the line, plain and simple. Being down in the bottom of the Big Ten for the past 2 years, it's unacceptable. So they got to find a way to get out. And now you're seeing that progress, and he's not going to let it stray away from that. You got to keep the team ball, keep the momentum, keep the culture going. And it looks like Ben Johnson's doing that. So I definitely have some respect for him on that one. Now, Additionally, with that, this team, the pace isn't super high by any means, but they are moving the basketball a lot better. They are keeping that ball movement going to open up and create shots and openings for this offense. That is a staple, is ball movement, moving away from the ball and all of that. That has been another welcome sight for this Gophers basketball team. But the bread and butter, the staple to this team is the defense. Whatever you want to call it, it is the defense that is holding this thing together. They are currently 73rd in the country in opponents' points per game, and that is with 351 teams in Division I basketball. So being 73rd in that top 100, even in the top 75, that's nice, and hopefully it continues to tick up as the season goes on. But impressive stats from Minnesota so far are the following. Of 351 teams, Minnesota is 6th in the entire country in assists per game. Now, it helps to have Elijah Hawkins, who is leading the charge and is 2nd in the entire nation, or possibly 1st. It's been kind of going back and forth with one other player, but best in the nation in assists per game on his own. But the whole team as a unit is 6th in the country because other players are still contributing to that team basketball effort, which explains why Ben has been a lot more strict on being within the system, creating good looks, and not being ISO ball heavy. So overall, it's been super impressive. 6th of 351 teams in the entire country in assists per game. Now, they're also 18th in assists per turnover ratio right now, so they're not turning the ball over a crazy amount. They're taking pretty good care of the basketball paired with that team style of assists. Then you've also got 33rd in the entire country in blocks, again, of 351 teams. That's a stat that stands out, and it tells you just how much the length of this team defensively can disrupt other teams. And then finally, they're 47th in bench points. And you've seen that a lot of the way because there have been multiple Gophers in double figures. Now, we might not have a player all the time that's scoring 20 plus points, 25 plus points a game. But what you are seeing is 4 to 5 Gophers with 10 to 14 points each game. And that's impressive in its own right, because usually that means one bench player is contributing in the double digits. It also means that a couple other bench players are usually contributing in other manners too. So to be a top 50 team in bench scoring per game is definitely a positive when it comes to this Gophers team. But let's look at Indiana. Their matchup with Indiana at Indiana is coming up on Friday. Indiana is currently 11-4. So teams that Indiana has lost to so far include number 5 UConn. At the time, it was a number 5 UConn. And then they've also lost to Auburn, a number 2 Kansas at the time, and also lost to Nebraska. Now, the Gophers have played 4 teams that Indiana has played this season, and both of those teams have won most of those games. Now, Florida Gulf Coast, both teams won. Maryland, both teams won. Michigan, both teams won. And then Nebraska, the Gophers won, but Indiana did not. So right now in the like games, the Gophers have won against all those opponents, and Indiana has dropped one to Nebraska. All of this tells me, though, regardless of the wins and losses, regardless of the scores between those, it tells me that the Gophers should not be counted out in this matchup. Of Indiana's 4 losses, 3 of them were blowouts, including the Nebraska game where they lost by 16. The other ones that were blowout losses were Auburn, where it was almost a 30-point game, and then also not Kansas, but UConn won by 20 points as well. Kansas was a 4-point loss, and that shows that Indiana can compete with some of the better teams in the country, but it also shows that they can be inconsistent on a night-to-night basis. So IU can compete, but they also could slip up. Now, their 2 leading players on their team are both sophomores. You've got Malik Renault, who is 16.5 points per game. He's their leading scorer, also has 5.8 rebounds per game, but he shoots 59% from the floor, which is phenomenal. He's efficiently making buckets while leading this team. He also shoots 47.8 from deep, which is a great percentage, but he doesn't take a lot of threes. So he's not a 3 threat at all points. He usually averages probably about 2 a game, but sometimes gets up to 4 3-point attempts a game. But I think that Indiana's best player is Kel'el Ware. He is a 7-foot center, 14.8 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, which is good for 5th in the Big Ten. He is a nice piece who is only getting better. They also have two senior guards who contribute in their rotation a lot, Trey Galloway and Xavier Johnson. Now, Xavier Johnson is in his 6th season of college basketball somehow, some way, but regardless, those two keep this team composed. And if they get shaken up, if they turn the ball over, that's when this team starts to struggle. But they do have high upside young players to pair with those two senior guards. And then beyond that core four, you've got two others rounding out the core rotation of this Indiana team, two freshmen, Mackenzie Mgbako and Gabe Cupps, who are both coming into their own still. So the Gophers are going to have their hands full, and IU has a lot of talent on their team, but that just gives you the gist of this Indiana team. And what will Minnesota need to do to pull off another road upset? We're going to talk about that coming up next with the 3 keys to victory here at Locked On Golden Gophers. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at Jase Medical, because I know we come here to talk sports, but sometimes life can get crazy, and the realities of real life, we just got to talk about it for one moment. Are you preparing for real life? Because according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right now in the middle of the worst flu season in a decade, and that can be scary. I can't imagine how helpless I would feel if my wife or my kids, if they ended up needing some medication during a supply chain issue and that kept them away from life-saving medications they need. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. Jase Case at Jase Medical is the thing to get. It has 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, and others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. So it's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Again, that's jasemedical.com, promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about the 3 keys to victory for this Minnesota game versus IU on the road this Friday. Now, the first key is definitely, in my opinion, you got to dominate the glass. Now, Kel'el Ware is going to get his, plain and simple. A 7-foot guy is going to end up getting his rebounds, and there's a reason he's averaging close to 10 rebounds a game. But if you can slow the rest of the team down, they don't really have the personnel to threaten on the glass, and that could play into the Gophers' favor. Now, Minnesota's size and athleticism should play into its favor, and if they can clean up on the glass, if Braden Carrington can clean up as a guard, both of our other guards as well, Elijah Hawkins usually finds himself close to double digits, sometimes in that 7 to 9 range of rebounds. If those guys can clean up along with the bigs, Pharrell Payne, Dawson Garcia, Isaiah Enan, Parker Fox, if they can clean up on the boards, it's going to play into Minnesota's favor, and that could be huge. Now, on top of that, we could see more Peyton Sparks from Indiana in this game. He's a 6'10" player, maybe just because of the matchup size with Minnesota. He sometimes works his way into the rotation, sometimes doesn't. I could imagine that he might find his way into more minutes in this specific matchup. Now, key number 2 is use your length. Use your reach on the defensive end. Help frustrate this team. If you can frustrate this Indiana team, I think you have a good shot at pulling up a road upset. If you can force Indiana to shoot contested threes from the perimeter, they can likely struggle. In the 3 of their losses this season, they shot 3 for 13 from deep, 6 for 17 from deep, and 6 for 16 from deep. So overall, they're not knocking down a ton of threes every game. In fact, a lot of their losses, they've kind of struggled and shot around 34% or less. But that other loss in the season was the Nebraska game where they shot 9 for 10 from deep, or 9 for 18. If they were 9 for 10, holy cow. But anyways, 9 for 18, that's 50%. That's a good 3-point shooting night for them. But the real winning element in that Nebraska game was the fact that Indiana turned the ball over 19 times. So again, that comes into play with the length of this Minnesota team. If you can get your arms in the passing lanes, if you can jump the passes, and you can get contested threes and contested shots, I think you can create some struggles, some frustrations with this Indiana team in which should play to Minnesota's odds when it comes to trying and winning this game. And then finally, the key number 3 for this game is put the pressure on the freshman. That should say on the freshman. Let's fix that real quick. Regardless, what I'm trying to say here is that if you put all the pressure on the freshman, that is probably your best bet at winning this game. Because if you can find a way to turn over the senior guards, like I said, that composure starts to collapse. That's how Nebraska really got out to a huge lead against this Indiana team. But on top of that, if you can force maybe Renault or Ware into foul trouble, that would be massive for your team, because those players are the keys, and how they go is how this Indiana team goes. So if you can get them frustrated, if you can get them off their game, if you can get them off the court with foul trouble, then you're going to have the freshmen taking on a lot of minutes for Indiana. And yes, freshmen can have big games, but at the same time, if you make the team more reliant on them, it should be favorable for the Gophers. So those are my 3 keys: dominate the glass, use your reach on the defensive end to bother Indiana, and then finally put the pressure on the freshmen. Now, my X factor in this Gophers versus Indiana game is Pharrell Payne. Now, last game in the Maryland matchup preview, I talked about how Carrington would be the X factor, and he was. He was a great player. He was the warrior of the game for the Gophers, and he showed out, especially defensively, especially on the boards, especially with his effort overall. He was a big-time player, and he was the X factor. Good call on that one. We're 1 for 1 there. We're moving, hopefully getting to 2 for 2, and my call again is Pharrell Payne. Defensively, we are going to need Pharrell at his best in this matchup. We're going to need his best game against Kel'el Ware, who has been kind of the staple for this Indiana team. And if he can give Kel'el Ware as few chances of second chance points as possible and clean up on the boards, it's only going to help Minnesota in the long run. On top of that, if you can get some blocks, if you can draw some fouls on Kel'el Ware, you're talking about a game-shifting momentum from Pharrell Payne. Now, obviously, Dawson Garcia will have moments playing defense on him as well, and he'll get some shots at him, but I think Pharrell Payne is the make or break for Minnesota. And we'll see if we can go 2 for 2 on that X Factor player of the game. Now, to wrap up this show, we're talking about Ben Johnson. Could he regain the trust of the Gophers fans? I think it's about time for Gophers fans to at least give him some leeway and some hope for the rest of the season. We're going to talk about why coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, because they have an amazing deal for new customers right now. An amazing deal that is guaranteed to get you $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's free money. And you know what we say: if it's free, it's for me. So at the same time, if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, you can take advantage of this new customer's bet by placing any $5 bet. If you place a $5 bet or more, win or lose, you're getting $150 in guaranteed bonus bets. And it's so much fun over at FanDuel. They've got some easy ways for you to make some live same game parlays. They even have a parlay hub where you can look at the most popular plays that are going on. And they even have a place in the Explore tab where you can find new bets to place. They've got player props, spreads, points, and so much more over at FanDuel.com. So go take advantage today and get your $150 in bonus bets by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is official partner of Locked On, of the NFL, and of the NBA. All right, Gophers fans, last thing we got to talk about here: is it time for forgiveness? Is it time to let Ben Johnson have a little leeway and embrace what is happening with the Gophers team this season? And my answer for that question is I would hope so. If Minnesota can get themselves to a tournament, if they can make some noise in a Big Ten tournament, if they can get themselves to the point where they're continuing to get wins, then I don't understand why you wouldn't be willing to forgive Ben Johnson after being in the cellar of the Big Ten for the past 2 years. Now, I get it. Being in the cellar, being in the bottom, it has been terrible. It has been, you've had to listen to ridicule, you've had to watch some bad basketball, you've had to see the team collapse at times, and that you don't want to see that at any point. No fan ever wants to see that, and you're ready for change the second that you do. But what we're seeing right now is a lot of growth, more depth, some good talent coming through to Minnesota, and we do want that to continue. So if they can turn that talent staying here plus winning more games, then I think it's about time to at least give him a chance to finish out what he's getting started. Now, the improvement has to continue. Don't think that I'm saying, oh, yep, we got a couple wins here to start the season, so we're good. Now, Coach Ben Johnson's good. Lock him in for the next 10 years. No, what I'm saying is that you can embrace the positives that you're seeing from this Gophers basketball team and still pull for them and still cheer for them and still go to the games and give them your energy, give them your back them is what I'm trying to say there. And if you can do that and you can help this team make some noise in the Big Ten, that momentum goes a long way, because this team, I've felt it in that arena. The crowd, when they are behind this team, it really sparks. It gives them confidence. It gives them more swagger, some more motivation, and they've pulled out wins simply due to this crowd at the barn in Dinkytown. So I think it is time that Minnesota fans should be willing to forgive Ben Johnson. But notice I didn't say forget. You still have to learn from what's happened, and you still have to continue to improve and continue to win. So overall, I think there are too many fans that are too grounded in take lock. They're like, no, we stunk for 2 years and we lost Dennis Evans and Jameson Battle's not here anymore and all this. And so Ben Johnson can't be any good. And I get there were struggles. I get it was tough. But at the same time, don't get stuck in take lock, because there have been improvements and the transfer additions so far have been nice over each of the coming seasons. And Ben's recruits that he has brought in have brought positivity to the program. The winning must continue, but it is a welcome improvement to see good basketball in Dinkytown once again. Now, Wisconsin just last season went from playing on Weekling Wednesday to being the number one team in the Big Ten right now in the early conference standings, as well as being the second highest ranked team in the Big Ten in the top 25 rankings. So overall, you're allowed to forgive and still want more. So the major caveat to all this, though, is yes, it's early, and yes, we still need more winning. But overall, Ben has shown his eye for talent, and that is pretty clear in my opinion. You've seen Jamison Battle come over in the transfer portal. That was huge. You've seen Peyton Willis come back in the transfer portal, and that was huge. Both nice in year one. Then you go into year two, and you get Dawson Garcia, and you get Talon Cooper. And I know a lot of Gophers fans probably roll their eyes at Talon Cooper, but he was still one of the best assist men in the entire country last season. Both of those players made an impact, and they had talent that could have went somewhere else. Then you look at his first recruiting class. Joshua Joseph, Pharrell Payne, Braden Carrington all have added value and shown upside early in their careers, especially for a class that wasn't highly regarded and was probably looked at as kind of a thrown together class more towards the last second, since it was right after his hire. Then finally, you got Cam Christie this season as a true freshman who is balling out as a true freshman. He looks put together. He looks poised. He's still growing at times, but overall, it makes you wonder how special this class could have been with Christie and Dennis Evans, and if it could have been a little bit different here in Minnesota as opposed to his last season in Louisville. But overall, Minnesota fans should be very excited with what they've seen so far in that grouping, but also with what is to come with next year's class in Isaac Asuma and Grayson Grove, but especially Asuma, because this is a guy that Ben Johnson was in on early from the get-go, from the jump. And even when his rankings weren't amazing, even when he wasn't getting a lot of love on the recruiting platforms and whatnot, Ben saw him as the guy, and he prioritized him, even over a guy like Daniel Freitag, who has been seen as one of the best players in the state for many years. Many fans were up in arms. Even myself, I was confused why we weren't going for both of them. But in the end, he stuck to his guns, and now Asuma has even passed Freitag in the state recruiting rankings. And on top of that, I honestly just went and saw Freitag last week in a high school basketball game, and I wasn't that impressed overall. Now, I'm not saying he's not good. He's very athletic. He's very strong. He's quick, but I am not convinced that he is ready for Big Ten basketball, and he will very likely have an adjustment period to the style of Big Ten play. But I think Asuma is a guy who can jump in from the jump and be a very valued player as a point guard for this Minnesota team. So overall, I think that this team is starting to shape up nicely. They're starting to show their depth. They're starting to show their energy. They're starting to play real basketball. And I think overall, Ben could definitely earn back respect from this fan base and is currently doing well in doing that. Hopefully the fans will be open and willing. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk about Gophers football, players who could have a big 2024 season, what success looks like in 2024, and also we'll talk about that women's basketball game and how they fared against Michigan. Right now they're up 36-31. We'll see if they can hold on, but we'll talk about it all tomorrow here at Locked On Golden Gophers. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Sky Umag, go Gophers, and as always, don't forget to subscribe.